Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. As everyone's getting logged in and figuring out how this whole Zoom conference works, I want to welcome you to our third Protocol virtual meetup. We've had a few really interesting ones so far. I'm Issie Lapowsky. I'm a senior reporter for Protocol, and I'm reporting to you here from my bedroom. And today I am joined by Representative Khanna of California. The congressman represents a large chunk of Silicon Valley. So today we're going to talk about how the tech industry in Silicon Valley and also lawmakers in Washington are responding to this COVID-19 crisis. So Congressman, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me on, and congratulations on Protocol. It's a great platform, and I'm excited to see it grow.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So before we get started, just a little housekeeping. You guys will notice at the bottom of your screen, if you scroll down, there's a Q&A box. And so if you will send us your questions, I'll be happy to pass them along to the congressman. All right, so let's dive in. So Congressman, I want to start today with the pretty unsettling unemployment numbers that we got. Over 6.6 million Americans filed jobless claims in just the last week, and over 10 million people in the month of March. And what we know from our own reporting is that the tech industry has not been unaffected by this. We've seen waves of layoffs at a lot of these smaller startups. Before you came to Congress, you taught economics and you worked in the Commerce Department for a bit. So I wonder, when you saw these numbers today, how did they stack up against your expectations for how big this hit was going to be?
Well, it's heartbreaking. I mean, we all know some of these people. These are people who were working at restaurants. They were driving Ubers. They are folks whose businesses have been shut down at airlines. And the question is, how quickly are we going to get people back to work? Is this going to be unemployment and jobs that are lost forever? Or are these going to be furloughs for 3 to 4 months where people can then get back to work? If you look at the stimulus we passed, it's about $2 trillion, which is about 10% of GDP. And the projections are that the second quarter is going to have 40% reduction in GDP. But that's 40% annualized. So you're talking about a 10% reduction. So the hope is that the stimulus would match the reduction. And then come the late summer or fall, we can get these folks back hired, not furloughed. Of course, all of this depends on solving the public health crisis. I believe if we can solve the crisis by the summer in terms of really mitigating the spread, then we can see a recovery with the proper economic actions and people getting back to work. And what we need to do is figure out how do we make sure they can make their rent payment in the meantime and have enough income in the meantime.
You mentioned some of the sectors that you're concerned, might be losing jobs permanently. Are there certain sectors that you think are at risk of that, where you think these unemployment numbers are going to stick?
Well, I think that the unemployment numbers are going to continue to go up. I mean, people are talking about 20, 25%. The question is, when can they get back employed? And here's the challenge. I mean, I think people will get back employed, but some of these businesses will be lost forever. I mean, if you're a small restaurant and you go under, we may have a new restaurant come up, but it's not going to be the business that was existing. And so I think there's going to be a lot of devastation for these small businesses, and people are going to have a hard time getting back to work right away, which is why I think we need additional stimulus. We need to make sure that the payments, cash payments, aren't just one time, that we're doing it for 4 or 5 months, which I think is going to be, in a best case scenario, the duration of this crisis, or at least doing it until people are still sheltering in place. We need to make sure that there are incentives in place for small businesses to hire once we start rebuilding. Other European countries have done that. We need investment in things like infrastructure to create job opportunities for folks. So I think the question is, where is the next government response?
So you think it's less a sector problem and more of a size problem? How much do these small businesses have to float on? I know one thing that you were really concerned about that you and I have spoken about is the way the stimulus package was set up. There was some question around whether startups that have received venture capital funding would be eligible for these small business administration loans that are available to small businesses. Walk us through why there was that concern, and also what you're hearing now as far as whether the small business, the SBA and the Treasury Secretary are going to clarify those rules.
Well, Izzy, I think there actually may be some breaking news. Mnuchin has just said that he is going to make sure that the startups do qualify. That is a big deal if true. Speaker Pelosi and I had sent a letter to Mnuchin and the SBA administrator. We also had a letter that went from Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. It's sort of bipartisan. In fact, I had reached out to the White House about it. So it looks like the message has gotten through. It will make a difference for thousands of jobs if this rule is changed. I mean, there is no reason that the affiliation rule makes no sense. It means if you're a startup and you get some money from a VC, and then the VC is investing in a different startup, according to the affiliation rule, you have to count the employees, not just of your own startup, but every startup that the VC is invested in. And that would eliminate you from qualifying under the 500 employee rule. Now, people say, well, why can't the VCs are rich? And of course they are. And private equity is rich. Why can't people just go to VCs and get the money from them? Right. And I told my progressive friends, yeah, I'll tell you what's going to happen. The VCs will say, first plan, lay off half your employees. And is that really what we want? That they're going to go get the money from a private sector fund who's going to insist on layoffs? So the rule waiver will allow them to actually keep the employees. And that's my focus, is not just saving the startups, but it's saving the many people employed at startups. And these are not just people at startups who are engineers. I mean, you have administrative assistants, you have folks who are janitors in certain cases, you have folks who are food delivery or food preparation people. I mean, these are jobs in blue collar and jobs in the sciences and technology.
And is it your understanding that this waiver is going to impact both venture capital backed firms and private equity backed firms? And do you think that should be the case?
I do think it should be the case. I mean, look, I've been critical of private equity where there's been a need. I've spoken out against the carried interest loophole and believe that should be taxed. I've said that private equity needs to have a certain amount of reserves when they're investing and skin in the game, so that if companies are going bankrupt, they're not just getting their management fees. But in this case, the point is not to the point is that this is hurting the startups. I mean, if you're a startup and you get some private equity money and you're about to go bankrupt or not meet payroll or lay people off, you should be able to get funding to keep you afloat. Remember, the Paycheck Protection is only an 8-week program. We're just talking about giving people a 2-month loan that could become a grant to keep people employed. So this is not some large bailout for startups. This is just giving them the cash to stay employed while the government is asking them appropriately not to do business and to stay sheltered.
On that note, a few years ago, you and I were talking about the idea of a universal basic income, which was being floated in a lot of these tech circles. Facebook's co-founder Chris Hughes was talking about it, and of course, Andrew Yang has been very vocal about it more recently. But at the time when we spoke, you were more comfortable with an expansion of the earned income tax credit. So basically, give people more money for working. And I know you recently introduced another bill along those lines with Congressman Tim Ryan. But now that, as you say, so many people are out of work and they're not going to be working probably for a while, is it time to reconsider some kind of temporary UBI? And is that something that you think your colleagues are amenable to in an emergency situation?
Well, I'm for making sure that we have generous unemployment benefits that can provide a livable wage while people are unemployed. I'm for cash infusions, which is giving money to folks under 100,000 or 150,000 household or 250,000 so that they can make ends meet in economic crises. But I still think that I believe in the dignity of work. We can't people are not going to be fine with a bunch of tech leaders making money and then mailing everyone a check. That's almost too easy. They need we need to have something that gives them work and gives them job opportunities, that they can do things remotely. We're seeing now with Zoom and other things that a lot of these jobs can be done remotely. So my view is expand the earned income tax credit, make sure that you're supplementing the workers who are not making enough, and also expand Social Security disability. So for people who really can't work, they should be getting a minimum income that's much higher than what we currently give them. I think currently they get about $14,000 a year. But for people who can work, our responsibility is to give them meaningful work.
Got it. I want to turn to some of the questions that we're getting for you. This one comes from John Robinson. Can startup investment requirements, for example, accreditation, be relaxed in light of the current situation so that startup funding doesn't just fall off a cliff?
That's a great point. I mean, I think that's something I'm happy to look at in our office. I mean, I believe that some of those accreditation rules are necessary so you can protect investors and make sure that pension funds, firefighters, teachers are being protected. But I'm open to considering that because the valley of death is a real thing. I mean, as I'm sure your audience knows, and the valley of death is for most startups when they start out for a year, 2 years, they are negative. They're spending more money than they're taking in. And that is the most difficult time for startups. And that's going to be aggravated. That valley of death runway is going to be extended, given that it's going to be harder to get business. So if there are ways to relax it without compromising the integrity or oversight issues, I'm open to looking at it.
We've got another question from Stephen Lynch. He's asking, Congressman, with record unemployment that we're seeing, is now the time to provide a meaningful incentive for individuals and companies to engage in large-scale reskilling, some combination of student income subsidies, debt relief, incentives for apprenticeship programs, and the like?
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, we ought to be engaged in student debt relief. I mean, the idea that these people are still having to pay off $30,000, $40,000 of student loans is really troubling, especially given that it's going to take a few years for some of our younger folks to recover from this, or people who've had student loans, even older folks who still have student loans to recover. And I think the idea is supporting apprenticeships, supporting people to get additional education, vocational education, digital skills, trade skills, makes a lot of sense. And it's something that we ought to do. We've underinvested in this country in people. We've overinvested in capital. And it's this time that we actually have rules and laws that invest in people.
I wanted to also ask about the FCC right now. You know, a lot of people are having to work from home. Their kids are having to be educated at home. There's a digital divide. So obviously the FCC has come out and asked these telecom companies to pledge, you know, to give people more affordable access to internet. But what more do you think the FCC should or can be doing right now to help people who are working from home, kids who are learning at home and are maybe on the wrong side of the digital divide?
Well, the companies can and have been stepping up, companies like Microsoft and other tech companies, to try to provide temporarily access. But ultimately, this crisis shows that in this country at this time, everyone should have access to high-speed internet. And this is why we need to pass Jim Clyburn's bill, which would have $80 billion go into giving high-speed internet access to every part of this country, to minority communities, rural communities, and it would allow municipalities to do it. It would allow some of these companies to build it, but we just need to get it done. I mean, we've been talking about the digital divide since the 1990s, and I think a crisis like this now highlights the difference. There's a huge difference in this crisis if you have access to the internet versus if you don't.
Mm-hmm. But passing a bill wouldn't necessarily help the kid who needs the access today. So is there stuff that the FCC should be doing right now for the people who need that access today?
Well, I think short of requiring and incentivizing companies to provide it, there's not much that can be done. And I think they should call on tech companies to be providing as much access as they can and to work with them, both in compensating them at a reasonable rate of cost for doing so and subsidizing people for that access. I mean, part of the challenge of access is not just that we need to build more fiber infrastructure, it's also affordability. So if some people are not being able to get on because of they can't afford it, I think this is a time where the government ought to be subsidizing poorer communities, poorer Americans to get on the internet.
I want to turn to another question we got. Okay. This is from Tara Hairston. She says, you bring up an important point. Silicon Valley business leaders are largely guided by libertarian ideals. Do you think tech companies, particularly in the Bay Area, will begin shedding their non-essential employees? I think part of that, the subtext of that question is that we've seen a lot of these companies like Facebook and others step up and say, we're going to be paying people even if they're not able to work for us right now. You see that going away?
I've been pleased so far with the tech community's response. They said that they're not just going to keep their employees, but also their independent contractors. I know there was some concern at Apple with janitors and security building guard and other food preparation workers, and whether if they're not coming to work, whether they'd still get paid or whether they'd be furloughed. And Apple made the decision not to furlough any of them. So most of the big tech companies, as I understand it, are not just paying their employees, but they're paying the contractors who do a lot of the work. And that's very, very important. And I appreciate that they're doing that.
And I wanted to ask how you would grade how these companies are doing in terms of managing the crisis on their platforms, getting information to people in the way they should be, stopping the spread of misinformation. And also the leaders of these companies, they have tremendous wealth, and I wonder what you think of what they're doing with their money. So let's start with Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. How would you grade how he's responding to this and how the company is?
Well, look, I think they're doing a good job of trying to not have misinformation. I thought it was very smart to have Fauci into a town hall. I've asked and said that Facebook needs to be more constructive in how they do things online, right? It's not just unregulated speech. They can actually create forums to educate the American public and to have thoughtful rules of engagement, create town hall spaces to do that. And so to the extent that I would say, why not do something once a week or twice a week? And it's allowing people like me. I mean, I've had Facebook Live town halls. I'm doing one a week with my constituents. We have 600-700 people participating. It's allowing me to really stay in touch with the community. So on that score and censoring false information, I think they're doing well. Of course, all of us in Silicon Valley could be doing even more when it comes to supporting the telehealth and initiatives for telehealth, when it comes to supporting science and research. But overall, I think what I hear is a real sympathy for science and technologists. The person who I wish was president during this whole crisis was Bill Gates. I mean, if Bill Gates was president, we would not be having nearly this this crisis. I mean, there are a lot of places I don't agree with Bill Gates, and I don't think he should be president on other issues. But when it comes, if I wanted someone in president for 6 months on the coronavirus, people should look at Bill Gates' TED Talk in 2015. He predicted literally every single thing that's happening and warned what we needed to do. So my hope is that after this, people will listen to science and people will see the positive roles that technology can play.
And what about Mark Zuckerberg as a person? He's obviously giving a lot of money to the cause. I wonder what you think of the interventions he's been trying to roll out.
Well, look, I mean, the Chan and Zuckerberg Foundation really has supported a lot of medicine research. And I think to the extent that he can personally be giving funding for getting protective equipment into hospitals, to funding vaccines, to possible vaccines, antiviral drugs, making sure that people are getting access to food in places and medicine in places that have been hard hit. I think that's all good. And I hope that's where he will direct his philanthropy. I hope he looks to people like Bill Gates as a role model. I mean, Bill Gates has done incredible good for the world with his philanthropic activities. And, Zuckerberg's still young. He's got, I wish him a long life. He may have 60, 70 years to live. And so if he can use his resources for positive philanthropy, that would help the world.
Okay. And how would you grade Jeff Bezos and Amazon, which is a totally different dilemma than Facebook, because they can't just send their workers home and keep paying them. They have to have them working and delivering and working in warehouses where they're being put at risk. So how would you grade them on this crisis?
Well, I think they needed to do more on the safety. I'm concerned that they haven't done enough to keep workers safe and free from transmission, and really need to do that. I also think they should have doubled the wages. Frankly, I think the government should be providing bonus wages for essential workers, and I consider Amazon workers essential. We get Amazon packages still. I mean, it's so many people need basic groceries, basic supplies. They are prevented a much greater crisis. Imagine if these online services weren't available. And I am concerned that there's been some reports of a person being fired for dissenting. So certainly that's antithetical to the internet, which welcomes dissent. On the positive side, they're hiring 100,000 people. I mean, we need companies like Amazon hiring, and they're paying paid leave, and now they're paying $17 an hour. Senator Sanders and I had the Stop Bezos Act, and in response, Bezos moved to $15 an hour. So these are the positives, but I think, my view is the innovation of Amazon it's a great innovation in the distribution system of this country, but they need to make sure workers are participating in the gains of that, and that's what I hope Bezos will do.
Do you have any concerns about this crisis entrenching these monopolies even more, as we see other companies go out of business, laying people off? They don't have the cash resources to stay afloat through this. Congress and the Department of Justice were already concerned about monopolies in the tech industry. Do you worry that this might entrench them?
I do think that's a fair concern, and we need to be vigilant. And what I've said is Amazon shouldn't have platform privilege. In other words, it shouldn't be able to say that its own products go right up at the top of the search. It needs to be fair about who it privileges in the search results when you go on buy a product. It shouldn't be able to copy a small business design and then undersell them with making their own product. So I think there are smart, common sense things we can do that allow the platform to exist, so that small businesses maybe that never had a shot now can sell on Amazon, but doesn't allow the platform to take advantage of those small businesses. And that's the balance we need to strike.
I want to go to another question from the Q&A box. Donna Galvin is asking, shouldn't gig workers be classified as employees? And this is related to the stimulus package, which would offer unemployment benefits to gig workers. Why are the American people bailing out? Oh, this just jumped. Why are the American people bailing out extremely successful companies who have worked hard to avoid paying into unemployment insurance and healthcare?
Well, we're not bailing them out. We're bailing out the employees. I mean, the problem isn't, the fault isn't with Uber drivers. The fault is with the company. And there should have been classified as employees. That's obvious to me. I mean, look, Uber was losing $4 billion a quarter. If they had classified people as employees, it would have been another 500 million. So you would have had 4.5 billion. They can do that. I mean, the fact that they're losing $4 billion is the problem. I mean, why can't they have an extra 500 million on costs? And now we find out that they're sitting on 10 billion of cash reserves. So there needs to be a clear rule that these people are employees. And some of I've been talking to Uber drivers who in the past liked the flexibility and the model and thought they could make more money. And now they realize, no, I wish I had health insurance. I wish I had some guaranteed pay in a time of crisis. So I think we have to do that and insist on that. But that doesn't mean that government should be helping with unemployment insurance for those independent contractors. I mean, we can't be cruel about the issue just because some of these companies have been unfair.
Do you think this crisis is going to help Congress better understand how these companies need to be regulated?
I do. I think at the end of this crisis, then people are going to insist that we need to have people like Uber drivers, Lyft drivers treated as employees. You know, the other thing people don't realize is that most of the Uber's business is done by full-time employees, but they're a small fraction of Uber's total pool. And so they're the ones who get the most hurt. So you may have some marginal people who have a decent job and do an extra 10 hours a week of Uber driving, and for them, it's not a big deal being an independent contractor. But for the 20% or so of Uber's workforce that does it full time, that it's their only job and does most of Uber's rides, for them it is a big deal, and they ought to be treated as employees.
Another question coming in from Meg Miles, who, full disclosure, is a relative of mine. What types of innovations do you expect from the tech sector as a result of this pandemic?
Well, I think there's going to be innovations in workforce and how work is structured. I think people are going to work remotely more and try things. I mean, not just technological innovations, but actually process innovations. I mean, what does it mean to have a interview done on Zoom? What does it mean to have Zoom meetings? And what does it mean to have video conferencing? And what are the pitfalls of it? I think people are going to have the sense, oh, I really wish we were at work. This isn't working. And on the other hand, they're going to have the sense, oh, wow, we didn't need that many meetings. We could have done a lot of this remotely. So I think our understanding of what remote work is possible is going to totally change after this crisis. And I think it will expand. I think more companies will also look to diversify their workforce. They're not going to want to have a risk of having their entire workforce in one city in case that city shuts down or some disaster happens, and they may be more geographically spread out. And then I think the science and technology. I mean, if there's one thing this tells us is we need massive investment in science. It's not an option, it's a necessity. The fact that our CDC budget is 1.5% of our defense budget is a real shame. I mean, we ought to be investing in NIH to have new vaccines and CDC to have a public infrastructure for testing, in research universities that are leading in cutting edge science. And I think that's going to be a consensus that emerges.
So I know we're running up against our time. So last question, I want to turn to the presidential election. I wrote a story this week about how campaigns are really scrambling now to adopt these new tech tools that will let them reach voters now that they can't, have canvassers on the streets, and now that they can have town halls and events. So, a lot of these companies that are building these tools were in a bit of a panic because they don't think that their clients are necessarily prepared for this. How ready do you think the Democratic Party is to go head to head with Donald Trump and with Republicans in a now mostly digital race?
It's a great question. I mean, look, Brad Pascal's a talented person in terms of who Trump has digitally. They were very savvy in 2016. They did huge beta testing on Facebook. They ran multiple probabilities of ads, they targeted ads. And we need to have that kind of sophistication. I'm confident we can get there. I hope we will collectively, all of the campaigns, pool our insights to help whoever the nominee is do that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of this campaigning is going to have to be digital, and we're going to need to out-organize digitally the president in the battleground states.
Do you feel comfortable that the Democratic Party is in a good position there?
I mean, I think we can do it. We have a lot of the support from tech leaders in our party, and extraordinary people like Reid Hoffman are working on these projects, and Ron Conway. I think what we need to do is make sure that the political side listens to the technology side. A lot of times there's a disconnect. The political side says, oh, these technology folks don't really understand politics. And the technology folks say, well, they don't understand technology. We really need to figure out how we bridge that divide. How do we get the technologists to design things that they would use in the private sector for campaigns? And if we do that, then I think we can get an edge over Trump, because a lot of the tech leaders, the most innovative leaders in the world, are on our side.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Congressman. I really appreciate it with all that's going on. And for everybody else who joined us at home, please make sure to join us again next week. We're going to have another one of these. My colleague, Mike Murphy, who's Protocol's Transformations Editor, will be speaking with Erica Leslie She is the global head of operations at Goldman Sachs, and Lars Andersgaard, who is the head of market technology at NASDAQ. And they're going to be talking about the extraordinary efforts going on right now to keep the markets up and the technology that runs those markets running smoothly. So I hope you guys will join us. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
You too.